This account is a translation of a recovered data shard, the last testament of Fleet Primarch Xylar of the Athelian Dominion. The events, technologies, and civilizations described are part of a fictional narrative and are not a record of historical fact. My kind has a word for everything. A designation for every star, a classification for every species, a doctrine for every conflict you could possibly conceive. Our language is one of absolutes, of certainty. It's the language of gods. But we have no word for the silence that now echoes in our grand halls. We have no word for the shadow that lingers in our two hearts, where a single, unified mind once resided. We have no word for fear. That's a human word. A primitive, chaotic, and utterly infectious concept. And we learned its meaning on the day a single, insignificant ship from a forgotten world taught us that we were not gods. We learned it on the day our soul was shattered. For 10,000 cycles, the Athelian Dominion wasn't a government. It was a physical law. We'd conquered 1,000 worlds, but conquered is such a crude term. We didn't burn and enslave. We corrected. We brought order. Our truth was the only truth, and it was beautiful. Our society was a single unified consciousness we called the Convergence Web. Billions of minds, from the lowest worker drone to the highest fleet Primarch, all connected, all sharing one pristine pool of thought and existence. There was no I, only we. Dissent wasn't a crime. It was a logical impossibility, a rounding error we'd long since eliminated. Our power was absolute because our purpose was singular. Our Seraphim-class cruisers didn't merely patrol the void. They were extensions of our will, their energy lances singing celestial harmonies that could pacify stars. Our command vessels, the magnificent Archangel class, were more than ships. They were mobile cathedrals, monuments to the perfect order we had achieved. From the bridge of my own Archangel, the inevitable truth, I could feel the thoughts of all 50,000 crew members as a single, steady pulse. It was the heartbeat of certainty. We encountered other species, of course. We observed them from afar, their chaotic struggles, their petty wars, their fleeting triumphs. They were discordant notes in the grand symphony of the cosmos, and it was our divine mandate to bring them into harmony. We would arrive, demonstrate our superiority, and they would see the logic of our way. They would join the convergence, their chaotic sense of self dissolving into the perfection of us. It wasn't subjugation. It was an ascension. We weren't conquerors. We were saviors. That was our truth. The only truth. The anomaly appeared in Sector 9, a dead quadrant of space we used for stellar cartography drills. It was a joke of a vessel. Our long-range sensors classified it as unidentified, not because its tech was advanced, but because it lacked any discernible design philosophy. It was an asymmetrical collection of mismatched parts, scarred with millennia of micrometeoroid impacts and radiation burns. It looked less like a starship and more like a cosmic shipwreck that had somehow kept moving. It offended every principle of Athelian engineering. It was ugly. It was wrong. The High Council designated it human ship, referencing a long-dead file on a species from a minor death world in some uninteresting arm of the galaxy. A species noted for their chaotic social structures and self-destructive tendencies. We deemed them unworthy of correction millennia ago, figuring they'd annihilate themselves in due course. Clearly, that assessment was premature. We gave the vessel a tactical designator, the unforeseen variable. A fitting name, as it turned out, because it didn't behave like any ship should. Its first transmission wasn't a declaration, a request to parley, or a threat. It was a chaotic stream of modulated energy our systems flagged as severe data corruption. We tried to filter it, to find the message in the noise, but there was none. It was just noise. Only later did we learn the human term for it. Music. It was the first weapon they used against us, and we didn't even recognize it as an attack, dismissing it. That was our first mistake. The existence of a single primitive ship on our border was a curiosity, not a threat. The Council, in its infinite and tranquil wisdom, dispatched one Seraphim-class cruiser, the Harmonious Intent, to intercept, study, and escort the unforeseen variable out of our space. It was the cosmic equivalent of a gardener shooing away a stray insect, a gesture of benign authority. 24 cycles later, the Harmonious Intent vanished. It didn't send a distress call. It didn't report weapon impacts. One moment, its placid, reassuring consciousness was a bright node in the convergence web. The next, there was just a void, a silent, terrifying hole in our collective mind. It wasn't a feeling of loss. It was deletion, as if a fundamental equation had simply stopped computing. This was no longer a curiosity. It was an affront. I was tasked with the correction. I sent a full battle wing of 10 Seraphim cruisers, a force that had pacified entire star systems. They formed a perfect containment sphere around the human ship, a net of divine energy from which nothing could escape. I watched the engagement through the convergence, feeling the calm, collected thoughts of 10,000 crew members as one. The battle, when it came, was sheer madness. The human ship didn't engage in elegant orbital mechanics or duels with energy lances. It played. It used its projectors not for tactics, but to plaster the void with holographic absurdities. Flickering images of predatory felines with syntactical errors overlaid. Recordings of their own species' ancient, brutal wars set to that same chaotic music from before. Our comms channels, usually pristine streams of data, were flooded with millions of competing human voices, arguing, singing, laughing, and weeping all at once. For our tactical AIs, designed for a logical universe, it was a death sentence. They fell into cascading logic loops, trying to find a pattern in the chaos, trying to assign a strategic value to a pictograph of a dancing rodent. For our crews, linked as one, the effect was devastating. The unified consciousness that was our greatest strength became a conduit for psychic poison. The noise, the absurdity, the raw, unfiltered emotion of it all, it was a direct assault on our very soul. And then came the physical attack. The human ship didn't fire lasers. It weaponized physics itself. It launched what their records later called gravitational shears. Micro-singularities that didn't tear through our crystalline hulls, but folded the space our hulls existed in. Our ships weren't blown apart. They were twisted into impossible geometries, their atoms unwound. The unforeseen variable wasn't fighting our ships. It was fighting the reality they occupied. The battle wing wasn't defeated. It was dismantled, disassembled by a force that treated the laws of the universe like mere suggestions. The final thought from the wing's commander, before his mind was extinguished, wasn't of glorious sacrifice. It was a single alien concept that echoed through the void he left behind. This is not logical. I decided this heresy would end. I personally led a fleet of 100 warships with my own archangel, the inevitable truth, at its heart. We weren't just a fleet. We were a force of nature, an ironclad law of the cosmos about to be enforced. We warped into the sector and surrounded the lone human ship, a perfect globe of absolute power, our weapon ports glowing with the light of dying stars. No more games. No more absurdity. Only erasure. I opened a channel. My voice, the voice of the Dominion, echoed from my ship to theirs. You are an error in the grand design. A discordant note. For the sake of cosmic harmony, you will now be corrected. You will cease to exist. The unforeseen variable did nothing. It just floated in the void, silent, its scarred hull a blemish in the face of our perfection. My finger hovered over the command that would unleash the wrath of gods. The crews of 100 ships, 1,000,000 minds, were linked as one, ready to execute my command in perfect synchronicity. The universe held its breath. Then came the shattering. The human ship didn't fire a weapon. It didn't try to flee. It didn't beg. It opened a channel directly into the heart of our convergence web. It wasn't a hack, not a virus, not a cyber attack. Those are concepts of conflict. This was something else. It broadcast a single thing into our unified soul, humanity. It wasn't data. It was experience, the unfiltered, chaotic, beautiful torrent of a billion individual lives. The taste of salt in a lover's tear, the searing pain of a broken bone, the quiet pride of a parent watching their child sleep, the paralyzing fear of a soldier alone in the dark, the soaring triumph of a composer finishing a symphony, the bitter regret of a final, unspoken word. Joy, sorrow, rage, love, jealousy, sacrifice, creation, destruction. An entire species' worth of memory, art, philosophy, and emotion poured into our pristine, orderly consciousness. For a unified mind, a mind that only knew we, the sudden, violent introduction of I, it was a cataclysm. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Across 100 warships, 1,000,000 minds fractured. The perfect, singular we shattered into 1,000,000 screaming, terrified eyes. Gunners on the brink of firing stared blankly, overwhelmed by the memory of a first kiss that was not their own. Navigators collapsed, weeping for the loss of a pet they'd never had. Engineers screamed in terror, experiencing 1,000 different death scenes at once. The shared consciousness that had made us gods became our undoing. It became an echo chamber of infinite suffering and infinite joy, a cacophony no single mind could withstand. On the bridge of the inevitable truth, I felt the links to my crew sever one by one. And I was alone. Alone inside my own mind for the first time in my 1,000-cycle existence. The silence was deafening. The emptiness was a physical weight. And in that vast, terrifying solitude, a new sensation bloomed, cold and sharp. For the first time, I felt my own two hearts beat not in unison with my species, but as a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. It was the rhythm of fear. My fleet didn't fall in glorious battle. It just stopped. 100 ghost ships, crewed by 1,000,000 broken minds, adrift in the void. The unforeseen variable watched our silent armada for a long moment. Then, without a word, it turned and powered up its strange, illogical drive. It didn't claim victory. It didn't conquer our territory. It didn't finish us off. It simply left. Its mission, whatever it might have been, was complete. That was the true horror. We hadn't been defeated in a war because for them, it was never a war. It was a lesson, or maybe an exorcism. In the cycles that followed, the Athelian dominion crumbled, not from an outside attack but from the inside out. With the convergence shattered, our society fell apart. Worlds descended into chaos as billions of beings, suddenly burdened with a self, struggled to understand who they were. We'd been a single, magnificent organism. Now, we're just 1,000,000,000,000 lonely cells, each screaming in the dark. Our power is gone. Our certainty is a lie, our divinity a joke. The silence in our grand halls is the sound of gods learning how to be mortal. Other species, long held in our harmony, saw our paralysis and began to stir. Our perfect order was replaced by human chaos. We're a scattered people now. We're trying to rebuild, to find a new way to exist. We're learning to say I instead of we. We're learning human words, and with them, human concepts. Regret, hope, doubt, and above all, fear. Fear of the silence. Fear of the chaos. Fear of the terrifying, beautiful, and utterly unpredictable species that shattered our soul not with weapons, but with a simple, devastating gift. A mirror. They showed us what we weren't, and we couldn't bear the sight. Was their act a declaration of war or a brutal act of liberation? A curse or a gift? The silence is our only answer. The account of Primarch Xylar ends there, but the conversation can continue with you. If you were captivated by this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales from the edge of the galaxy. Let us know in the comments. What do you think the true purpose of the human ship's mission really was?